Some people say that the first event storyline in Marvel Comics was the marriage between Reed Richards and Susan Storm. Others say that it was the Kree-Skrull War. Others say that it was the Avengers Defenders War. The 1980s was the time that comic book events really came to the fore. They would feature large casts of characters, revolve around a deadly, usually cosmic threat, and even have their own series. But the genesis of these events goes way back before Marvel released their first limited series. That was the Marvel Superhero Contest of Champions. And I've talked about how that came about before. See? Here's a link to prove it. On that occasion, I talked about how it came about essentially as a result of the Spider-Man vs. Hulk at the Winter Olympics Treasury Edition. I don't believe it. Another link. And that was true for that storyline. But the very idea of the crossover event existed in the very earliest days of the Marvel Age of Comics. The Amazing Spider-Man issue 1 featured a crossover with the Fantastic Four, who, coincidentally, had their own crossover that very same month when they encountered the Incredible Hulk. Not only that, but they had the first crossover in Marvel history the previous year, 1962, when the Submariner appeared in their mag. Okay, so there had been crossovers from the earliest days of the Marvel Age. But is that the same as an event? I think an event has to have something that you can hang your hat on, such as, I suppose, a wedding. This is where the third Fantastic Four annual and the wedding of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Girl comes in. It contained a milestone in the lives of two of the characters, and certainly had a plethora of guest stars. But would we really consider a storyline that was contained within one annual an event? Fast forward then to 1971 and the Kree-Skrull War. It certainly had bigger scope, lasting 9 months, and it had guest stars. But it only played out in one title, the Avengers. So let's move forward another couple of years to the summer of 1973. Summer was usually annual season, when comic book fans would get an extra long, extra helping of their favourite heroes. But that summer was different. For some reason, Marvel had decided they weren't going to release any annuals that year. There were a couple of king-size specials masquerading as annuals, but they only consisted of reprints. One person in particular, Steve Englehart, thought that was a terrible shame. He had actually been writing both the Avengers and the Defenders books for the last year, and it occurred to him that it could be fun to pit the two teams against each other in a clash that would last all summer and feature in both titles. Something big and fun for the readers in the absence of the annuals. The previous writer of the Defenders, Roy Thomas, was at that point the editor-in-chief, and although he liked the idea, he was concerned about Steve's groundbreaking suggestion of bouncing the story between the two books. If one was delayed, it could scupper the whole thing. Luckily, Roy was persuaded, and even luckier, none of the books were delayed. So to the story, but I'll tell you what, let's have a bit of setup first with issue 4 of the Defenders from late 1972. This issue features a very early, but not the first, appearance of Valkyrie. We've already discussed the writer, and he is joined by Sal Buscema on pencils. Take it away, fellas. We are on Earth, in Britain no less, but the Defenders have only just arrived there after doing a bit of dimension hopping in the previous issue. During that adventure, they rescued a woman called Barbara Norris, but in so doing, she seems to have lost her mind. The Hulk, always one for a damsel in distress, has now become very protective of her, and blames Doctor Strange for her current state of mind. To protect her from any further harm, the Hulk leaps away with her into a conveniently placed nearby castle. Namor, recognising that the Hulk himself, due to his massive size and strength, poses a threat to the woman, says that they just can't walk away and leave them in the castle. So they follow. But they can find no signs of the Hulk in the castle. In fact, they can't find signs of life at all. The whole place seems to have been completely abandoned. Until, whilst searching a cellar, they find a burning brazier, the flames of which suddenly leap high into the air, and when they subside, an entire army has appeared. Doctor Strange concludes that they are in another land, whereas Namor suggests that maybe they are in another time, due to the armour that the soldiers are wearing. We in the modern age recognise their leader as Scourge, or the Executioner, and he urges his men to attack the defenders. Whilst Namor brawls with the armoured soldiers, a new character enters the fray, a rather cliched looking wizard who naturally pairs off against Doctor Strange. So maybe it is the past, especially as he mentions being conjurer to the Queen. In zapping Doctor Strange, he incredibly robs him of his powers, and then Strange is easily subdued by a couple of the warriors. Briefly, Namor fights on alone, before he is zapped by Scourge, and then, in his weakened state, knocked out by one of the warriors. When they regain consciousness, they are in a prison cell, along with Bruce Banner and the woman Barbara. And yes, I do mean Bruce Banner, because the cell that they are being held in is enchanted, so none of them can use their powers. There are other cells there as well with other prisoners, those prisoners being the Enchantress and the Black Knight. And it's the Black Knight that fills us in on how those two got there. He says that the Enchantress and the Executioner were banished to that land by Odin. Then she was captured by Zeus, but she escaped and came to him at his home of Garrett Castle. And that's the castle that the Hulk leapt into at the beginning of this issue. She then entranced the Black Knight to get his help to rescue the Executioner from the Queen of this land, but it didn't go too well. And voila, they are in a dungeon. The Enchantress, however, can see a way for them to escape. She can use her powers to transform the woman Barbara into a Valkyrie. And then Valkyrie, being such a powerful warrior, can free them all. And indeed, she does transform Barbara. The mad woman's mind, her entire consciousness, is replaced by that of the Valkyrie. She quickly destroys the cell doors, freeing the heroes whose powers quickly return to them. I know. How did the Enchantress still have her powers? I can't explain it. As you would expect, there is then an almighty battle between the Defenders and the Enchantress and Black Knight, who has called his flying horse to him, and their various medieval-themed enemies. Doctor Strange combines his powers with those of the Enchantress to defeat the Wizard, whilst the others, particularly Valkyrie, make swift work of the foot soldiers. It's not all one-way traffic though, because Scourge is proving to be a handful, as he takes out the Submariner and then keeps the others on their toes, before our new hero comes face to face with him and contributes to a kind of tag team effort to put him down. So now the only person left to deal with is the Queen, Cassiolina, and Valkyrie fancies her chances. However, despite her best efforts, she discovers that she can't hurt another woman. But the Enchantress has no such qualms. With the battle over, the Enchantress and the Executioner are reconciled. But that's not good news for everybody, because Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, remember, is in love. He can't accept losing her to the Executioner, and he even suggests that they duel for the right to be her companion. The Enchantress says that that has touched her, so she wants to show her gratitude with a kiss, an enchanted kiss that turns the Black Knight to stone. The Enchantress then whisks herself and the Executioner away from the scene, and before too long the Defenders also leave, courtesy of Doctor Strange, along with the statue of the Black Knight and his flying horse. Valkyrie is also there, and during the journey back she tries and succeeds in breaking the Black Knight's horse. They arrive back in the present-day Earth, back at the Black Knight's home of Garrett Castle. Doctor Strange swears he will do all he can to reverse the spell on Dane Whitman, although at the moment he doesn't know how. In the meantime, he will mystically seal Garrett Castle from any possible intruders. He asks Valkyrie what she's going to do now, and she says, "Isn't it obvious? I'm going to join you. I'm going to become a defender." Doctor Strange would spend the next few issues trying to reverse the Enchantress's spell, to no avail. Which brings us to the brink of war between our two teams. And you'll hear differing opinions as to how long this event is. Some people will say that it is 6 issues long, focusing only on those issues that contain numbered chapters. Others will say it is 7 issues long, because they, rather reasonably, include the prologue. And yet others will say it is 8 issues long, including the wrap-up. You know us well enough by now to know that we're going to take the most comprehensive approach. Therefore, for us, it's the 8-issue version, which begins in issue 115 of The Avengers. You already know that the writer is Steve Englehart, the penciler is Bob Brown, an artist that is rarely talked about these days. Sure, he didn't have the most distinctive of styles, and although he racked up a long list of credits with both Marvel and DC, his only substantial run was on Detective Comics at the end of the 60s and early 70s. As for his work on The Avengers, this was during a run of around a dozen issues before our pal Sal took over regular art duties. The Avengers roster at this time consisted of classic characters Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, the Vision, Scarlet Witch and Black Panther, along with the not-so-classic Swordsman and Mantis. Shall we see them in action? There are 2 stories in this issue. One is the prologue of the Avengers Defenders War. The other kind of leads up to that. The Avengers are headed to Garrett Castle because when they needed the Black Knight's help against Magneto back in issue 110, he was nowhere to be seen. And that was weeks ago. So they want to check that he is okay, safe and well. But on arriving at the castle, they don't even get to use the door knocker because the entire team is repulsed by an invisible barrier. And we know why, don't we? Despite various Avengers' best efforts, they can't break through the force field. And actually, Cap gets very blamey at one point. "Okay, Cap, take it easy. He's trying his best." Mantis is there, and she uses her mysterious powers to gaze into the recent past. And she sees a vision of Doctor Strange casting his spell on the castle. This behaviour is quite mysterious to the Avengers. So there's no sign of the Black Knight, and Doctor Strange has cast a spell on his castle. What does it all mean? Well, they'll have to contemplate that later, because now it's time for action. As all of a sudden, from the ground around them, emerge big, brutish troglodytes. There is a frantic battle that is over all too quickly, as the troglodytes knock out their enemies with some subterranean gas, before taking the Avengers to see their king. Now this troglodyte king isn't happy because his people are starving. That force field around the castle has stopped them from entering the castle to steal food, and he blames the Avengers. He says he saw them, toppers as he calls them, in shiny clothes, and they not only put a force field around the castle, but they carried the Night Topper away. The troglodyte king explains that they were once people, much like you, but an evil king many centuries ago drove them underground, and since then they have been interbreeding, and thus have ended up as they are today. Thor tries to explain that the Avengers don't know anything about the force field, but the untrusting king doesn't believe them, and orders them to be thrown into the pit. In the pit, they encounter a pale subterranean monster. Thor, the Vision and Mantis are able to free themselves, and the 3 of them then take on the monster, whilst the rest of their colleagues are still bound. Naturally, they overcome the monster, and this incenses the troglodytes, and they extinguish any light so they can now hunt the Avengers in pitch darkness. All of the Avengers are helpless in such absolute dark. All except one, the Black Panther. He alone can see in such dark conditions, and he takes the fight to the troglodytes. He finds a narrow tunnel where they would have to fight him one at a time, otherwise he would stand no chance. And he fights really well, even taking out the king, who then quickly surrenders, saying that the toppers are too strong for his people. He says he will let the Avengers go, but the Black Panther has a better idea. Indeed, the Avengers do leave, but in doing so, they also get medical help for the troglodytes. And it is hoped that eventually the troglodytes will be reintegrated back into normal human society. As the Avengers leave Britain, they can't help but wonder. Clearly, the Black Knight was taken away by people in costumes, just like them. And it seems that one of them was Doctor Strange. But who were the others, and why did they kidnap their friend? They are going to have to seek answers from the master of the mystic arts himself. So that's that. The sparks of suspicion are flying, but soon they will be stoked into a blaze, because the issue ends with a 3-page prologue. It begins with the slightly unnerving image of a sightless Loki falling to his doom from a mountaintop. This is because at the end of issue 207 of The Mighty Thor, Thor blinded his adoptive brother with a bolt of lightning. Then, in his sightless state, Loki fled the scene, only to run right off the edge of the mountaintop on which they had been battling. But maybe he is not doomed to die this day after all, because just as he is about to hit the rocks below, he vanishes. He has been saved. By whom? The dread Dormmamu. Dormmamu has a plan, and he wants Loki's help. He wants to conquer the Earth, but the last time he was defeated by Doctor Strange, he swore that he would never again invade Earth's dimension. But he has recently learned of the existence of an item called the Evil Eye, a device with incredible power. Enough power for him to expand his own dimension until it actually swallows that of the Earth. In so doing, he can conquer the planet without breaking his word. Now, this is an odd decision, to use the Evil Eye as the MacGuffin for this big clash. Apparently, Steve Englehart was a big fan of continuity, of tying together all these various comics, even maybe in small ways, just to show that they were all part of the same big world. The Evil Eye had only appeared once before. That was in issue 54 of the Fantastic Four from 1966. In that issue, the Human Torch wanted to use the Evil Eye to help free the Inhumans, including his then love, Crystal. They were trapped beneath an impenetrable dome, and the Evil Eye seemed to be the only item powerful enough to break them loose. But it was too powerful, and Wyatt Wingfoot helped to destroy the Evil Eye before Johnny Storm could use it, but also before it destroyed Johnny Storm. And that was it. Everyone believed that the Evil Eye had been destroyed, even Loki. But Dormmamu knows the truth. The Evil Eye hadn't been destroyed. Instead, it was split into 6 constituent parts. And now, with Loki's help, he will locate and reassemble those 6 parts so he can carry out his plan of conquest. Now, I'm sure you are keen to see the beginning of the war. After all, we have just read the prologue. But it's not going to start, not just yet. First of all, the Defenders have to finish off their latest adventure. Valkyrie and Hawkeye, yes, Hawkeye, are squaring off against the Submariner, who is under the influence of the Red Ghost's mind control. He's not as entertaining without the super apes, although he is in league with Atuma, and the pair of them plan to use the Defenders and numerous fish to overcome Atlantis. As for Hawkeye, he has been hanging out with the Defenders for a couple of issues since he flounced out of the Avengers in issue 109 of that comic. As you would expect, the Submariner overcomes both of the heroes, which then puts them in a position to be subjected to the Red Ghost's mind control. And then we fast forward 2 weeks to Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, where the Doctor announces that in his efforts to cure the Black Knight, he has met with success at last. Now he is jumping the gun a little bit because he hasn't cured the Black Knight, but he has made progress, and he summons the other defenders so he can tell them this great news. However, only 2 of the non-team arrive, with no sign of either Valkyrie or Namor. Surprisingly, it seems that it is the Hulk who knows where they are, but he isn't in the mood for telling the others. He says, "Why should Hulk do anything dumb magician wants?" Such a bad attitude. A brief diversion from the Silver Surfer allows Doctor Strange to place the Hulk under a trance. And he says, "Now, tell us what you know." What he knows is that he was recently fighting alongside Namor, Valkyrie and Hawkeye against the forces of Atuma. The other 3 were captured and put on board a ship, but he didn't want to join them, so he left. Nice move, you jade arse. He doesn't know any more than that, but that is enough of a clue for Doctor Strange and the Surfer, and they both leave on the Surfer's surfboard to search the world's oceans. That's going to take a while, isn't it? Within the oceans, the attack on Atlantis has begun, and we get one of the funniest lines you'll ever see, as the defenders of Atlantis shout out, "Whales bursting through the very walls of Atlantis herself, and behind them, squids, porpoises." Oh no, not the porpoises, anything but the porpoises. Our mind-controlled heroes are there too, and they help devastate the defenders of Atlantis, before Valkyrie suddenly begins screaming in terror and hallucinating. Above in the skies, Doctor Strange suddenly feels a familiar mind and instructs the Surfer to take them below the surface. They quickly find Valkyrie, who is still experiencing some kind of episode, and that is because the Red Ghost's mind control is interfering with her usual mental state, meaning that the Valkyrie's persona is being subdued and Barbara Norris's is coming once more to the fore. That's why she was having those hallucinations. Doctor Strange now helps to calm her down and reads her mind to find the location of their colleagues. At the same time, he discovers that the Red Ghost is relying on cosmic rays to power this mind control, and that gives him an idea. He directs the Surfer to take them up into the atmosphere, where they then combine their powers to create a barrier around the Earth to block all cosmic rays. With no cosmic rays, the Red Ghost's powers falter, as does the attack on Atlantis. The fish, previously under his control, quickly swim away. He is not so lucky, however, and as he attempts to escape, he runs straight into Hawkeye, and Hawkeye's bow slams straight into him. Our heroes have now all regained their minds, including Valkyrie, and the Submariner is very happy to take on his old foe, Atuma. And then it's all wrapped up very quickly in just one panel. As we're told, the defenders are all rounded up and they leave. They leave for the home of Doctor Strange, where a new adventure awaits. Wow, that was quick. But enough build-up already. Let's get this party properly started with Chapter 1, which, much like the prologue in the issue of the Avengers, takes up the last few pages of this issue. Doctor Strange finally gets to announce to everybody the progress that he has made. He has found Dane Whitman's essence. He's found it in the Dark Realm, which is where it fled after his body was turned to stone. With this knowledge, he can use the Orb of Agamotto to make contact with that essence. And he is successful. This system is flawed though. It doesn't set up a conversation, a dialogue. It's more one message is sent and then another message is received. So he informs the essence of Dane Whitman that the defenders are working to rescue him, and he asks if Dane has learned anything from being in that dark domain. But Dane doesn't have much to report. He doesn't know anything, and time doesn't seem to move there. He had faith, but having heard Doctor Strange's voice, he now has hope. And the message begins its journey back to Doctor Strange. On its journey though, it passes the gruesome twosome, Loki and Dormmamu. Dormmamu was expecting that message to be sent to Dane Whitman. In fact, he directed it towards him. And now, as the return message heads towards them, he captures it, changes it, and sends it on its way to Earth. When the message gets back to Doctor Strange, it has changed dramatically from what we saw. Now it seems that Dane is saying that he has learned that the item that will help to rescue his essence from that dark realm is the evil eye. He implores Doctor Strange, please hurry, because he had faith and now he has hope. It's the Silver Surfer who explains that Reed Richards told him that the evil eye no longer exists, but Doctor Strange says it must still exist, and the Defenders won't rest until it has been recovered. That chapter 1 was only 1 page longer than the prologue, but now things really heat up, and it begins to feel to me like it really is an event in Avengers issue 116. And doesn't that cover tell you all you need to know? We begin where we just left off, at Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum. They are there looking for answers, but, well, this is becoming a bit of a habit now, they are struggling to even get to the front door because an unseen force is pushing them away. Eventually Thor manages to bang on the door and, incredibly, it doesn't fly off its hinges, and Wong answers. He says that Doctor Strange mustn't be disturbed because he is engaged in vital research. But the Avengers are insistent, and after Wong shuts the door in their face, Thor does bust it off of its hinges, and the team pour through. The team aren't there very long before an unseen force again expels them from the house, but they are there long enough to get a glimpse of a familiar silhouette through an open door. Outside, Cap is now certain that the Black Knight is being held captive in Doctor Strange's sanctum. So what do? For now, they're going to retreat. They're going to work out a way to counter Doctor Strange's magic, and they'll be back. Inside the sanctum, the Defenders are oblivious to the commotion outside, as Doctor Strange fills them in on the history of the evil eye. This is a very familiar recap for us because we've seen this before, although now we are told something slightly different. Because after seeing Wyatt Wingfoot shoot the evil eye out of the Human Torch's hand, and what appears to be an explosion, we do actually see that it has been split into 6 separate parts. And these parts are distributed far and wide across the globe. Apparently this was a failsafe built into the evil eye, so that if anybody tried to use it at full power, which the Human Torch was going to do, then it would split apart so that nobody would get a second chance to use it, because it's that dangerous. Doctor Strange says that 6 is also the sacred number of Avalon, apparently, and there are 6 of them, 6 Defenders. Hawkeye says, "Say no more, Six Fiend." Six Fiend? Not his most tasteful joke. He may as well have just called him a six offender. Hawkeye's dodgy jokes aside, it is clear to the Defenders what they need to do, and they go their separate ways to recover those pieces of the eye. It's about this time that Loki realises that he may have been duped. Dormammu said to him that if he helped him, he would restore his sight. But whenever Loki brings it up, Dormammu puts it off, makes excuses, says, "Oh, we'll do that later." Not only that, but Loki realises that if Dormammu can expand his dimension to engulf Earth, he could also easily engulf Asgard. And as much as he has issues with his fellow Asgardians, that is still his home. He realises he needs to try to stop the Defenders from gathering those parts of the evil eye. So he decides to turn to the one person noble enough to not turn him away, despite his past actions. Thor. He projects an image of himself into Avengers HQ and nearly explains what's been happening. He doesn't want to admit that he's been up to no good, so instead he says that he has discovered a plot by a group of supervillains called the Defenders. And remember, this is so early in the history of the Defenders that nobody beyond their immediate ranks even knew that they existed. He says they are led by Doctor Strange and count amongst their numbers individuals with whom the Avengers, or even Earth as a whole, have had issues with in the past, such as Valkyrie, the Incredible Hulk, and the often surface dweller hating Submariner. He also says that the Silver Surfer has been driven to villainy by his bitterness at being trapped upon planet Earth. And he tells them that Hawkeye is a member of this team, and they are shocked at Hawkeye's treachery. But you would question it, wouldn't you? Especially as this is Loki telling you this. Mind you, that would spoil our fun. He then finishes off by explaining about the evil eye. Now it is clear to the Avengers, just as it was clear to the Defenders, what they must do. They must stop the Defenders. Before long, they all take off. Some under their own power, some using a Quinjet, but all in different directions. And now this is what we all paid our entrance fee for, isn't it? Chapter 3, Round 1. The Silver Surfer versus the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. Yeah, we are starting big. This was intentional on the part of Steve Englehart, because he reasoned that if the first matchup was big and impressive, then that would keep readers coming back for the rest of the story. He also saw a parallel between the Silver Surfer and the Vision as two individuals that looked like aliens but felt like humans. He saw them both as repressed humans. Our first location is very exotic. It's a volcanic island in French Polynesia. No sooner does the Silver Surfer arrive than the locals herald him as some kind of god. I don't know, it's a bit of an old-fashioned view of islanders, isn't it? In reality, I'm sure that at least one of them would be wearing a Manchester United top. The Silver Surfer searches all over the island, which is where Doctor Strange has insisted the evil eye is located, but he can't find it, until he realises there's one place he hasn't checked yet, and that is in the heart of the volcano itself, and he quickly corrects this oversight. As he enters the molten heart of the volcano unscathed, an Avengers, I guess it's a Quinjet, arrives overhead. On it and within it are the Vision and Scarlet Witch. I'm sure the Scarlet Witch can fly. The Vision actually doubts what they have been told, and he is hoping that he can talk to whoever their opponent turns out to be. That opponent is currently using his cosmic rays to blast the lava aside in his search. The Scarlet Witch, meanwhile, is convinced that their opponents are all evil. She points out that the Avengers have fought the Hulk, the Submariner, and Valkyrie before. The Silver Surfer has struck out at mankind as often as he has helped it, and Hawkeye has just got the hump. Case closed. Unfortunately, the Silver Surfer's cosmic blasts have triggered a chain reaction that causes the volcano to erupt and knock the Quinjet out of the sky. Luckily, the Vision sees this, and he flies to the aid of the Scarlet Witch. As he is tending her unconscious form on the ground, he looks up and sees the Silver Surfer emerging from the volcano crater. The Scarlet Witch had accused him of being too logical, but having witnessed what he views as an unwarranted attack, now the Vision is getting emotional. And now we have our first clash of the war, and it's a doozy. There is great action. Visually, it looks spectacular, and lots of striking colours thanks to the lava all around them. The noise of the volcano stops them from talking, stops either of them from explaining what is really going on. And eventually, it is a blast from the Silver Surfer that actually uncovers their piece of the evil eye. Both combatants are desperate for that piece, and they wrestle over it before another eruption knocks it from both of their grasp. And now it's a straightforward race between the two of them, because they see the evil eye falling to earth, and so the Vision and the Surfer on his board hurtle towards it, both desperate to win that first piece. But then the Vision spots something. He sees that the lava flow is heading directly towards the unconscious form of the Scarlet Witch. For him, there's no doubt as to what the priority is. The Silver Surfer capitalises on this, grabs his section of the evil eye, and leaves the scene. The first contest is over, with all participants now convinced that this is the beginning of a war. Well, come on, who's next? Okay. Defenders, issue 9. Get a load of this cover. Probably the best in the whole storyline. It looks like Iron Man is going to have his hands full, doesn't it? A triumphant Silver Surfer returns to base and explains to Doctor Strange that it seems the Avengers are against them. Doctor Strange thinks this is unusual, so he uses the Orb of Agamotto to take a look at Avengers Mansion. All seems quiet and tranquil at the mansion until he spots the presence, the influence of Loki. He also discovers that the Avengers now include in their team the Swordsman, an internationally known criminal. This confirms to Doctor Strange that the Avengers have turned evil. Either that or Loki is controlling them. Either way, they are the enemy. The Silver Surfer remains back to guard the statue of the Black Knight, whilst Doctor Strange sets out to make his own contribution to their efforts. Meanwhile, the Vision is on his high-tech CB radio to inform his teammates that what Loki told them about the Defenders is true. They will go to any lengths to obtain this ultimate weapon. Ding ding, seconds out, round 2. Iron Man versus Hawkeye. And what a great image to start this round off with. But no, Valkyrie isn't hanging around. She's just dropping Hawkeye off on her way to Bolivia. Before she leaves, there's just enough time for Doctor Strange to send them a warning about the Avengers, which surprises Hawkeye, but not as much as he surprises Valkyrie when he randomly plants one on her. Which she doesn't appreciate. Or does she? Then, as he watches Valkyrie fly off in one direction, he sees Iron Man fly in from the other. He reasons that if the evil eye had been found in the area, it would be taken to the local university for them to study. His hunch pays off, as the professor there explains that their part of the artifact burst from the ground near the mountains several years ago. He guesses it's 700 years old, but he's got no idea what its actual purpose is. A shiwi, perhaps? Iron Man takes a look at it and explains to the professor and to us how he thinks it fits together with the other pieces. He says there are faint grooves along the sides, as if it fits inside another piece. And it's hollow, as if still another piece fits inside that one. It's at that point that Hawkeye makes his presence known, snatching the eye from Iron Man's grasp. Iron Man is quick to follow the arrow out of the window, and he's going to give Hawkeye the fight that he is clearly spoiling for. Hawkeye says, "Remember how it used to be? Just me against you? But now it's more. Now it's Defender against Avenger." A bit presumptuous of Hawkeye to assume he's a Defender. We'll see how long that lasts. But he's right. It did used to be Hawkeye versus Iron Man. Back when Hawkeye made his debut in Tales of Suspense, issue 57, where the two ended up tangling. Again, we get another great action-packed fight, but again, the colours are so bright and vivid. Hawkeye says he's been trying to show the world what he can do on his own since leaving the Avengers, but so far he hasn't been a solo star. No, but it'll come. It's just a few years off yet. He says he's got new friends and a good cause to fight for, which he decides not to say but think, which is saving the Black Knight. Iron Man thinks ruling the universe. Then there's a bit of back and forth about how Hawkeye used to think he was better than Iron Man, then he thought he was better than Cap. And Hawkeye says that's a load of nonsense, before unleashing a handheld acid arrow into Iron Man's bonds. He says he may be the weakest Defender, and Iron Man may be the second strongest Avenger. Ooh, second strongest. That's got a sting, hasn't it? But he says it's going to be him that carries the eye away. And he may be right, because Iron Man flies away in the hope that the friction between the air and his armour will evaporate the acid. He's successful and quickly returns to the battle with Hawkeye. He fires a couple of repulsor rays at him before Hawkeye fires off an arrow into the sky. But this is a magnetic arrow, and as it falls, it grabs a hold of Iron Man's gauntlets and pulls his repulsor rays so that they hit a nearby construction site. Iron Man quickly attends to the endangered construction workers at that site, with the same result as the Vision Silver Surfer battle. And that is that his opponent uses that distraction in order to make off with the evil eye. I can't help but think there's some kind of strange moral emerging here. Wait a minute. Where's the Hulk, Doctor Strange and Namor? Bloody dishonest cover. What's the point anyway? It's not as though a battle between Iron Man and Hawkeye wouldn't have been enough to entice us in. Oh well, let's see who's next. Ah, this should be interesting. Now we're in Indiana, where Doctor Strange is going to take on the Black Panther and Mantis. Oh, this one's going to be tight. Only kidding. He's going to wipe the floor with him, isn't he? It takes Doctor Strange precisely 2 panels to locate the evil eye. And that's because he uses a spell to make the evil eye glow brightly. But he's not the only person with eyes, because the Black Panther and Mantis, taking a much more pedestrian approach to their travel, also spot the glowing light. Even so, it's the Doctor who gets his hands on it first. But seeing the Black Panther and Mantis coming towards him, and not wanting to create a scene, he decides to disguise himself. As the 2 Avengers stumble across some locals waiting for a bus, one of them says that he's heard of a cat person in Chicago, but that cat person was a she. It's pretty optimistic that someone would understand that reference, even in 1973. It's the cat. Yeah, exactly. Mantis's special senses detect magic, and that leads her to attack a woman who's about to get on the bus. A sudden mystical force striking her from the woman proves that she was correct. That's no woman at all, it's Doctor Strange. He quickly takes flight and sees no sign of pursuit. But then the Black Panther is used to not being seen when he is pursuing his prey. He launches himself at Strange, and there's a brief tussle in the air, which surely the Black Panther is always going to win. But of course he's forgetting something, and that is that he can't fly. Despite what Black Panther thinks, Doc still is one of the good guys and has no desire to see his enemy dead. So he flies after him, intent on saving his life. Careful, it's that kind of behaviour that loses you the evil eye. The Panther's life is saved, not that he shows a lot of gratitude for it. At the same time, a local farmer sees what he calls 2 maniacs tearing up his property. So he fires off some buckshot from his shotgun to deal with them. At the same split instant, Mantis rockets across the farm, just in time to save both of the other heroes from being hit. Phew, I thought they were lining Mantis up to be killed then, but instead she saves their lives. Oh no, saves their lives? We know what that means. After the briefest attempt at hand-to-hand combat for Mantis, Doctor Strange hits the pair of them with a spell that stuns them long enough to allow him to fly away with his reward. And we finish with Black Panther saying that they were no more than ants to him. When he felt like it, he just stepped on them. If the other Avengers can't reverse this trend, they are all doomed. I've got to admit, he's right. It certainly isn't looking good for the Avengers, is it? But don't fret. In 1973, we were only halfway through the summer. And then, as now, we're only halfway through this clash. Surely Earth's mightiest heroes will turn things around in the second half of the contest. What's the betting it'll end in a respectable draw?